On this video, we will start to review the material for our module on digestive system. We will start by looking the general concepts such as wall structure of the alimentary canal. In the coming videos, we will follow the passage of food through the digestive tract, studying the anatomy and physiology of each structure as we reach them. On general level, I think that it is fair to say that this chapter has more of an emphasis on anatomy, and especially on structures that you will see with naked eye. Therefore, many students often tell me that they find this section easier than the previous ones. These are largely body parts that you all know and have seen before, so it should be quite a pleasant experience. However, before we get much further into content, I wanted to start with a very fundamental question. What are the general main functions of the digestive system? What are we trying to achieve, and how do we achieve that? Well, I guess that we end up again with this formula that we saw earlier in our course. This slide, of course, shows nicely the interlinking functions of the digestive, respiratory, and urinary systems. And why not to add the vascular element on it too? That's when it becomes to the transportation media. So what we see here is, of course, sugar, such as the glucose molecule, in this example, being converted into energy, such as ATP. So that's really what our body does. But let's consider a little bit more about what really is needed to make this happen and what else we need to take into account. And when we do, we end up with 4 main points. So firstly, the digestive system serves for the purpose that we need to get food into the body. So those sugars and nutrients that we use for energy and building materials, and which originate from the outside world, we need to get them inside our body to enter into our digestive tract. Then, once within our digestive tract, we need to break them apart into smaller components so that they are small enough to cross the layers that separate the contents within the digestive system from the contents of the rest of the body. And in this case, so that the molecules that we break the food into are small enough to make their way into the bloodstream, within the blood vessels. So the important thing to note here is that the food that we take in is initially made of 2 big molecules for this, crossing over the membranes that separate the contents of the digestive tract from the rest of the body to happen. So we need to break those into smaller components. And remember, we learned that back in the day on our BIO202 class that when larger molecules broke down into smaller components, some energy which was stored in this larger molecule, some energy was released in this process. And as for the 4th function then, we have the remaining non-digestible part of what we took into the body in the first point. We must get rid of it. And this as well has an important role. We will discuss it a little later. So there we have our 4 functions of the digestive system. And when we discuss this process, there are 2 terms that become especially important. So let's have a look at those. And the 2 terms that I want us to consider as they especially summarize the 2 key processes that happen are digestion and absorption. So digestion refers to the process where we break down the complex food molecules, which are too big for us to use as they are, into smaller molecules. And absorption is then when these small molecules are now small enough to be able to pass the membranes, so they are actually entering into the body's vascular or lymphatic system. So now they are really inside the body. So the difference between these two is important to know. Digestion was breaking the large molecule into smaller, and absorption was small molecules crossing the membrane into the body. If you are clear of those two terms, we are in a great place to continue. Next, I want to talk a little about two types of movements that happen in the digestive system. The first one that we are going to address is peristalsis. In this, we have a wave-like movement of the muscles in the alimentary canal, which results in the food moving onward along the tube. You can think of it this way. There are two types of people in the world, and you will find this out especially when moving in with someone. Some people squeeze the toothpaste tube so that they start from the very end and systematically keep squeezing it from there onward, so that this process as wave-like movements from the end to the tip. So this would be like peristalsis. The second instead is segmentation. In this, we are just mixing and potentially breaking apart the food bolus inside the tube, not really moving it into any direction. Such. So these are the type of people who just squeeze the toothpaste tube right from the middle. Now that we have our basics covered, let's have a look at the digestive tract as a whole. So digestive tract is really about 8 meters long. That's about 26 feet for those of you who prefer the imperial system. So 8 meters long, continuous tube. At certain parts it's thicker and at others thinner, but it starts at one end and opens at another. So the important thing here is that it is simply a continuous structure connected to the outside world from both ends. And then we have, of course, the accessory organs that help its function along the way. But we will talk more about them later. Our interest is going to be, for now, following along this tube. What's interesting to me is that all of this tube throughout the system has some similar characteristics. No matter where we're at, there are always 4 layers of the wall. All of this tract there. And we will discuss these 4 layers next. As a side note, I want to clarify that the term lumen refers to the inner part of the tube. So we will cover these layers in order from the most inner to the most outer. And sometimes you might see that these layers are also referred as tunics. Don't let that throw you off if you see the convention being used. What we are going to do is to review each of these layers. So why don't we get started right away with the mucosal layer. This is the layer that is in closest contact with the center of the digestive tract tube. And because the food material moves directly against it, it has a role of protecting other layers that follow it, as well as secreting whatever needs to be secreted at different parts of the tract, and as well as, of course, facilitating absorption at parts where this happens. The next layer is submucosa, and as this name suggests, it's below the mucosa. This layer is rich with glands, blood vessels, and nerves. So all about regulating the digestion. After that, moving outwards, then we have muscular layer or layers. The muscle that we see here are going to be smooth muscle. Remember it from our revision of the muscle types earlier. If not, there is going to be a link at the end of this video. And notice that we typically have circular and longitudinal muscles, with the circular being inner and the longitudinal outer. So movements on both directions are possible. And we find a special fiber direction at stomach, and this is oblique fibers. We will address that a little later. Finally, the outermost layer is the serosa. This is connective tissue that anchors the alimentary canal to its place. Now, there are a few more things that I do want to mention. And the first one of these that I do want to talk about is peritoneum. This is a serous membrane that lines the abdominal cavity. And you might ask what its function, right? Well, peritoneum covers the structures and anchors them within the abdominal cavity. And it generates these compartments within there. This is especially useful in ensuring that any infection that may be at one part doesn't get spread to other parts. And what I want to highlight here is that we often discuss about structures in relation to their location regarding the peritoneum. So we can have retroperitoneal structures. These were behind the peritoneum, like kidneys. And we can have intraperitoneal structures are within it. And then, for example, subperitoneal structures would be below it. Think of a bladder as an example of this. One part that is very striking, if you ever have a chance to do dissections, is the greater omentum. It covers much of the abdominal cavity, pretty much as one of the first structures that you will see after removing the skin, adipose tissue, and muscles. So a very important anatomical landmark. Now, let's look at another important aspect. And I want to say a few words about the innervation, and by this I mean the nervous control of digestive tract. And you might remember the two branches of the autonomic nervous system. Hopefully you will recall that the sympathetic branch was all about fight or flight responses. So when this branch is active, the activity levels of the digestion would go down. We are not concerned about digesting food. We are concerned about staying alive. In this case, digestion is not essential for the immediate survival. So what drives the digestive system to function up is going to be the parasympathetic branch, right? The last thing that I want to mention in this video is a very rich blood supply to the intestines. And if you think about it, it makes sense. The ultimate goal of the intestines is to extract nutrients and energy from the food. And that is just what happens. And to catch the nutrients and energy, we need a rich blood supply to the area. And this blood, more or less, all gets directed first to liver. Why would this be the case? Well, it is within the liver where much of this gets stored before the blood gets distributed to the rest of the body. Otherwise, body tissues are greedy and they would burn off that energy without a good strategic use of it. So that concludes our introductory video to the digestive system. Next, we will start to review this system one part at a time, following the path of food consumed. The foundation that we have built on this video will give us a good basis to do so. So I will see you in the next video.